That's what this is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a different title. I didn't pay attention to the title. So yeah, so basically that's what we're going to do here is somewhat of an overview of not so much the current IA offerings. I mean, we're going to cycle through some of that, but there's a lot of life cycle stuff to talk about. There's some series changes to talk about, and then new products and visualization. So unfortunately, it's a lot of PowerPoint, but hopefully it won't be too painful. Filler slide. So I guess part of the conversation will be around life cycle. So just to understand what Rockwell, their nomenclature as far as life cycle status goes. There's 4 states: active, mature, end of life, and discontinued. Active would be the latest and greatest, most current offering. Active mature would be still readily available. Well, available. But there's a newer technology available. End of life means that a discontinued date has been assigned and it's in that phase until the discontinued date where it's no longer available. So the first part of the portfolio for controllers are the microcontrollers, which at this point are the Micro 800 controllers and the MicroLogic controllers. The 800 controllers are the controllers that are programmed with the CCW software that everyone has some opinion on. And the MicroLogic controllers would be Logix 500. Now, the MicroLogic controllers are all but the 1400s have either been discontinued or have a discontinued date. So if you have 1400 still in service, or if you have MicroLogic still in service that aren't 1400s, you're probably at the point or past the point where you want to at least think about migration. And I guess what you would consider to be the most direct replacement would be the Micro 800s. Again, it depends on if you have any, if you prefer to go to a lower level compact Logix instead. That's all based on preference. But with the 1400 in mind, the 1400 just recently moved from active to active mature, and a lot of that is based around a semiconductor shortage. So whereas they're still available, they're still active mature, they're also very difficult to get right now. I don't really know a timeline where that will get much better. I mean, eventually we do know the 1400s will go away. Not long before this semiconductor shortage came out, I thought they released something that said they were at least 5 more years with the 1400. But like with everything else right now, there is some limited availability. So it's not something that you will probably want to consider for new installs, but just something to be aware of. There's not a lot to update within ControlLogix. I mean, over probably the past few years now, it's been the L7 or the 5570, and then later the L8 or the 5580. Anything before the L7 has been discontinued for quite a few years. And then these two will be the ones that they move forward with. And obviously the big difference being the L8 has the Ethernet port embedded on the processor.
Can I ask one quick question about that? For redundancy, is it still the L7?
The L8s do now have redundant firmware as of 32 or 33. It's been within the last couple of releases. I want to say 33.
It's 33, you have one processor.
What, one processor with...
Redundant.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But it does have redundancy though.
Yeah, with the RM2 module.
Minor rev, being over 50.
What's that?
The minor rev still has to be like over 50 for redundancy.
I'd have to check that. I believe they did do that the same, but it's definitely major rev 33, and then yeah, if it may be the different minor rev for the firm or for the redundancy, but it is redundant capable now. Compact Logix, similar. The families are the same. So the 5480 at the top, that's the one that is the processor with an embedded Windows operating system all in one unit. If you haven't seen those, we don't have one here, but I mean, your product manager, your local product manager, ask your account manager if you're curious about that. The 5380 family is the 5069 catalog numbers. A lot of people have started to switch to those from the 1769, which is also active. The biggest thing to remember is the 5069 does not replace the 1769. It just has some additional features. One of the main ones, the dual port Ethernet on the 5069, it can be assigned to separate subnets, where the 1769 was just for ring or linear topology, but same subnet. So at 5069, they have the more sleek I/O cards, just a little, different layout, but same software. I would say the 5069 just kind of builds on some functionality that the 1769 had. But there is a announcement for the L1 and L2. The L2 will be the next slide. So those were the compact logics with the embedded I/O. There is going to be a series change on both the L1 and the L2. Same thing, obsolete component, so they need to put a new component in and change the series. So as part of that series change, on the initial cut-in for the hardware, they'll be V34 only, and then they will release backwards compatible versions, but only back to version 30. So if you have an L1 or an L2 that's version 24 and you need to replace it, or you need to get a spare in, you're going to initially have to be version 34. Eventually you can do backwards compatibility to version 30, but regardless, that version 24 controller would have to come up to something. Now again, that's only the L1 and L2, and if you're not sure what that is, ask me later, ask your product manager. But it's, like I said, it's the block units with the embedded I/O. And this is going to be the same slide for the L2. But there's no concern with the L3, which is probably what the majority of people use. So natural segue for compact logics is the SLC 500 lifecycle status. Probably a lot of SLC well, not necessarily users, but SLC installs still. I know we still run into a lot of SLC, and I apologize if that's a bit of an eye chart, but basically a lot of the I/O for SLC has been assigned an end-of-life date, and two of the later processors, so you probably already know the 501s, 502s, they've been discontinued for a few years. The 503s are, I think the one memory has already been discontinued. The two higher memory options are still available, but I'd say most of our SLC users have the 504s or the 505s. The 504 and 505 lowest memory option has been assigned an end-of-life date. They have it July 2021. I believe it actually ended up being December 2021. But those two options are discontinued. However, the second highest and highest memory options within the 504 and 505 are still in the active mature stage. But the biggest thing is they're not going to stay there very long. So at this point, if you had a 541 fail, you could replace it with a 542 and update your controller properties in your program. But the overarching message is they are starting to assign more and more SLC hardware an end-of-life date, and they're just slowly moving everything to discontinued. And I think once something's assigned end-of-life, it's a year at least until it is fully discontinued. So, there's time, but it's definitely time to consider migration or modernization. And just to that point, this is some of you may be familiar with the PLC5 to ControlLogix wiring arm conversion. That does a similar conversion system does exist for the SLC to the 5069 hardware. So you can see, well, again, I don't know how, well, I guess it's pretty big. So you can see on this picture here, it's basically just removing the terminal blocks from the SLC I/O modules, and they go on a base similar to the PLC5 conversion system, and then they have pre-wired cables that go to the associated 5069 module. So, and that is all around the physical install. And then from a software conversion standpoint, We have the Logix Migrator tool. I'm not sure how many people have used it. In older versions of Logix 500, it was a separate download. If you have, I think, like version 11 or later of 500, if you do a file save as and set the file type as ACD, it will start that tool automatically. And that's how you can, if you want to, you know, see or approach converting a 500 to a 5,000 project without starting fresh, run through that tool. And again, anytime if you're going through that, you need any assistance or want someone to show it to you, get a hold of your account manager, and then, you know, myself or my counterparts in the other territories, we can always do whether it's a Zoom or whatever. It's a useful tool. I'd say it really depends on the size of your program, what you're doing with it. It's never 100%, you know, do that conversion, download it, and you're done. There's always going to be, you know, some warnings, some errors. For example, every single project that you migrate, every timer is going to get a warning, because in 500 you could set your preset, you know, millisecond, whatever. In 5000 it's all millisecond. So they're all warnings, but if you haven't used that tool, if you have 500 to 5,000 systems to migrate, it's definitely something to take a look at, because it can take a lot of your programming time, you know, decrease it drastically. The I/O portfolio, not much has changed here, and you know, for time's sake, we're not going to cover a ton of the I/O portfolio. I'd say really maybe the newest I/O would be the Flex 5000 that I'd imagine a lot of you have already seen. But Flex 5000 is just I guess it's a build on Flex I/O. So Flex I/O was the 1794 catalog number. Flex 5000 is 5094 catalog number. And it's very similar. The idea is very similar to that of, you know, the 5069 I/O or the 5580 processor, where it's faster scan times. You know, gigabit Ethernet port, everything seems to be going to that. But the Flex I/O, the footprint is the same as the original Flex, and at this point, it's been out for, I mean, maybe close to 2 years, definitely over a year. But they have a good bit of options in that line now. I did want to highlight the Dynamics modules. And because we have a demo of the Dynamics on our, I guess you would call our IA table next to registration. And what Dynamics is, I guess, as the world is getting more and more involved in the predictive and preventative maintenance strategies, Dynamics is this main module here. That's the one that we have out front. And that gives you the ability to hook up to 4 vibration sensors or position sensors, actually, you know, to a motor, a pump, whatever in your process. And then it's an Ethernet node back to your controller that you can, you know, as an add-on profile, and you can monitor those types of attributes, characteristics in your process via an HMI, or you can alarm and, you know, however you choose to do so through your controller. But it gives you a little bit more visibility into, you know, that type of predictive maintenance technique versus, you know, I know in a lot of cases vibration monitoring is an outside contractor, or I mean, when I worked in industry, we had a guy on staff that he was trained to do vibration, and he just went out manually every day and checked vibration. So that's the one that we have here that you can see. If you want to see it, we just have a Bluetooth speaker hooked up to it that just, you know, modulates the sensors. And then additionally, it does have the capability to have a couple add-on modules. I believe they can be temperature. I think there's a 4 to 20, a relay. But the main unit is just 1 per Ethernet drop. So if you had, you know, if you wanted 8 vibration sensors in your process, you would have 2 of these. They'd be 2 separate Ethernet nodes on your controller. So the operator interface portfolio, I guess on a 10,000 foot view has somewhat stayed the same. There's still the panel view, the component terminal, as they call it, will be the panel view 800. which if you're not familiar, that's the screen that pairs mostly with the Micro 800. It is programmed in CCW. That screen can also connect to a 1769 controller. And then the Panel View Plus, which was probably what Panel View Plus, Panel View 5000, probably what the majority of our customer base would use. And then our traditional offerings in the industrial PC line. I say traditional because we'll get to some later slides of some newer offerings in that. So again, just to highlight a couple units in here. I don't know if anyone here has any Panel View 5000 units yet, but the Panel View 5000 family is the family of HMIs that get programmed in Studio 5000 View Designer. So that is different from Factory Talk View Studio that you use to program Panel View Plus. Panel View 5000 is Factory Talk View Studio View Designer. And it's essentially meant to integrate closer with the Logix controller. I mean, if you've programmed any HMIs, it's definitely easier for linking, offline files, comms in general. I mean, I think if you've done it enough, View Studio wasn't the easiest thing in the world to set up comms or upload, download, Once you get used to it, it's fine. But so the 5310, you can think of that as like the Panel View Plus 7 standard. It just has some feature limits to it, up to 100 screens, only single controller connection, a touchscreen only. You can see the size offerings right there, basically 6 to 12. And then the Panel View 5510 would be the higher level. And it still has some feature limits to it, up to 500 screens. It can connect up to 4 controllers, which is relatively new. When it first came out, it was also a single controller connection. It does have dual Ethernet ports, and it has a bit bigger range of sizes from 7 to 19. And these come in both touchscreen and keypad. So, and if you're interested in these screens or in the View Designer software, I guess at 3 in this room right here, there's a View Designer Basics lab. So we'll have, it's all virtual, but we'll have the lab manuals and the images set up if you want to sit down and run through that lab. That'll run from 3 to 4:30. So then the Panel View Plus, which would be the more traditional panel view that's programmed within Factory Talk View Studio. If you haven't heard yet, either from me or from any of my counterparts or your account managers, for the Panel View Plus 7 Performance, I stress performance because there is Panel View Plus 7 Standard, nothing changes with that. Panel View Plus 7 Performance Series B, if you order a Panel View Plus 7 Performance today, it is a Series B. And so they're different from Series A. Series B, they changed the operating system from Windows 10 or from Windows CE to Windows 10. The idea behind that is to try to extend the life more. That's a lot of reason you get from Panel View Plus to Panel View Plus 6, Panel View Plus 7 is because of how often Windows turns over support for Windows CE. And this also, the Series B unit is much more powerful than the Series A unit was. So again, somewhat of an eye chart, but this has a Series A on the left, Series B on the right. So you had a single core CPU in the Series A to a dual core in the Series B. Huge changes. You have 512 meg of RAM in the Series A, up to 4 gig in the Series B. Now, of course, with every positive, there's a couple negatives. There is, in Series A, you have VNC capability in the panel views. In Series B, you will have VNC capability into the panel views. So you're probably, out of the box today, the Series B panel views don't have VNC capability. It will be a firmware release. It's not a hardware change, but it's probably looking more like March, April, May timeframe of next year that firmware will be available for the VNC capability. And that is the same thing with the Microsoft Office viewers. If you use the Microsoft Office viewers for the panel views, the Series A has it. The Series B does not on initial release, but it will have it with a firmware update. And again, they've said for both roughly 9 to 12 months.
You said
The Series A, if you special request it, we can still try. But it has to be a special request. If you just order one, it will come as a Series B. There's just a separate ordering process for Series A, and it's pretty much like a use case.
No VNC.
Not in the initial release. It will have it, not in the initial release. Yeah. So we do have some customers that are, the VNC is a much bigger holding point than the office viewers. No one really cares about the office viewers. As soon as you say about VNC, it's tough, and I get that. And honestly, of all the features that they could have not put on initial release, I'd rather they left like the web browser off, but something else. But I guess there's two ways to think of it. If you install a Series A now, someday down the road when you swap it out, it'll be a Series B, but by then it should have a VNC viewer. And like I said, we can still try to get Series A. Just when you order it, let your account manager or whoever know that you want to try to get a Series A. And the other thing, the other main difference is the Series B now uses Control Flash, so the Series A used the firmware upgrade wizard. There's actually two ways of flashing the firmware on the Series B. You can do, well, three, I guess. Control Flash Plus, but you can also flash it via USB. So when you go to the PCDC to get firmware for these Series B units, you'll see there's the DMK file that we would use through Control Flash Plus. There's also, I think it's a cab file that you would pick if you want to do it through USB. And the USB is actually much faster. If it were me, I would probably just do USB. But another thing to remember is the Series B does not ship with firmware. So similar to a controller, it just ships with a blank firmware like a PLC would. But I don't know if they're going to fix this. For some reason, it says it's version 10. It's not. If you get a Series B out of the box, it doesn't have firmware. So regardless of whether it says version 10 or not. And again, I hope they fix that in like later releases. But yeah, so that's a major difference. But yeah, you do have to flash firmware on a Series B when you receive it.
Does the Series B have NTP?
That is a good question that I could probably answer for you or get an answer for you. I don't know that off the top of my head. Yeah, ask me that afterwards and I'll find Rich Pontello's floating around somewhere. He probably knows, and he's messed with these a good bit as well. They will look different. I don't have a screenshot, but like at startup they will look different. The settings look different. There's of course an anomaly that exists with them, but not a major one. But Jim, we had one of our customers bought one, and he started it up and it kept like rebooting to the same page after he set when you first open it, it'll ask you for an address. So he set the address, then it asks you for a password like the old panel views did. And every time he tried to accept the password, it just kept reverting back. It wouldn't accept it. So we looked it up, and there's a anomaly with it that if you basically, only with some of them, if you set the address first and then try to set the password, it'll keep doing that. But if you factory default it, skip the address, set the password, it'll let you go. So I don't think there's anyone had any idea that it would actually be released initially without a bunch of anomalies. But if you go to the knowledge base and put in panel view and then plus Series B, you'll find some stuff. Yeah. Functionally, it's going to look very the same or very similar. It will take MER files back to version 8, so that's one thing to consider. If you have older than version 8 MER files, you will have to update them. But yeah, it does have it for the most part, except for those two, one of which is more major. Functionally very the same or improved upon the Series A. They should also be more available than the Series A because they're more more people or more manufacturers making the Series B than there were for the Series A. So I have noticed since the Series B started shipping, we've been getting more in bunches, and we just happen to have a ton of backlog to fill anyway. But they seem to be coming a little quicker. It's just the backlog is so huge that it's still a lot of catch up to play. So when I said there are traditional industrial PC offerings, I say that because Rockwell acquired a company called, well, it's ASEM. I believe it's Awesome. I believe that's how you pronounce it. If it's not, that's probably how they'll say it. So Awesome, I believe, is an Italian company that makes industrial PCs, and they kind of help to expand the portfolio. The 6181Ps, the old VersaViews, even the newer ones, they don't have a ton of, they're not very configurable. They have a few options, and they're not super affordable either if you compare them to other industrial PCs. So these Awesome PCs give you definitely more flexibility when it comes to speccing hardware. A lot of, I would say, the 6300B, the wall mount, the tinier book mount one is probably newer. I don't think we have one with that small of a form factor in the past that wasn't at least a thin client. And then the 6300M industrial monitors, these are monitors alone and industrial panel PCs. So those are obviously both similar to the VersaView offerings. And then this book mount PC, which is for, I guess, smaller form factor, but they're medium to high performance applications. And I think we get into each one. So the smallest class, they call them the Atom class, 6300B. Now they're box PCs and thin client options. So, and obviously for thin client, I think each one has a thin client option, and that really is useless to you unless you're in a thin manager application. But to just speak to the PC side, they are a smaller form factor. They're geared more towards, I'd say, small to medium applications, HMI applications, third-party applications, and they're small PC size to go inside inside an enclosure. They still have the all-in-one motherboard for the shock risk and everything, which all of these are going to have because they are all still, at the end of the day, industrial PCs. So it's not like just buying like a tiny Dell thin client and throwing in. They still do have an industrial component to them. But this one doesn't say. But so the wall mount box PC, this would be more medium to high performance applications. These would be more of the traditional size of what our VersaView box PCs were. You can with without a cooling fan. I guess the biggest difference is the core i3, i5, i7 dual LAN quad. So those are more options than we had in just the AB industrial PC offerings. I mean, they had, I think, maybe i3 and i5. I think they had two options though, and it was two options that were there was like performance and advanced. There wasn't very configurable, and I mean we could open Proposal Works if we get time to look at how configurable these things are, but it's a long catalog number, which I guess can be good or bad depending on how you look at things. The book mount PC, very similar medium to high performance applications, but it's supposed to be more of a space savings design. And it has optional UPS backup. Same thing with the configurable setup as far as what i3, i5, i7 dual or quad. And you'll see a lot of the specs are the same between the book mount PC and the wall mount PC. I think we get into it later, but the book mount PC, they have a future release that's supposed to be like for a longer run. I think we get to that here. So industrial panel computers, I guess it depends on the application. I mean, we do have a lot of integrated display 6181P or VersaView PCs out there. So again, these are going to be, I'd say, similar size wise to that, but more configurable. That's the biggest thing to remember, is more configurable. And if you compare price between these and the VersaView offerings, these do tend to be cheaper for a more powerful unit. And I don't have, like, you know, I can't throw out like a number for a certain size, but you know, all that info is pretty readily available. And then the industrial monitors, and these are strictly monitors that would be, you know, worked in conjunction with one of the box PCs. These are 8 to 24 inches in size, and other than that, I mean, they're pretty standard industrial monitors. The specs that you would expect to see, they all meet. So the upcoming product releases from Awesome, they have a long distance option up to 100 meters. I know that's going to be for the book mount PC, and I don't know. I only know that just because that's the example they use. I don't know if that's going to also be the same for the wall mount PCs, but I can't remember exactly. It's, you know, some kind of technology to give it a longer distance option without actually needing to use fiber. I just forget what the technology is called. So instead of having like you know, a PC to a switch in copper and then a fiber run to somewhere to, you know, get back to your controller, these will, or at least what they're saying is, they should be able to be a long distance single run option up to 100 meters from a PC to or from a screen to a PC. I can see if I have a yeah, right. Sorry if that's, like, kind of over explained that, but yeah, so from a display to a PC, and then, like I said, I know it's to the book PC. I'm not positive how they're going to release that, but these are supposed to be 2022 releases, so we'll see. So then the 6300 MA on-machine monitors, I believe that's supposed to be this, and it's kind of similar to, I don't know how many people, well, I say remember, it's still active, but the Armor View that was a, you know, an enclosed HMI that also had a configurable, like, button plate, push button plate, and then they had a, you know, terminal block inside, and then they could run Ethernet back to a controller. Those were panel views. We call them Armor Views. And I thought there was a slide in here. I must have hidden it because we covered it ad nauseum. But the 6300 on-machine monitors are, from what it appears to me, and again, these are future releases, it appears to be the same thing, to have some integrated buttons. I have seen the back of them. They look very much like a, you know, like a Hoffman, you know, panel arm, where they have, you know, a channel back to wherever your enclosure is. And my guess would be they probably have a similar makeup where your buttons are wired to some, you know, some terminal block on the back of the screen that then runs a single Ethernet cable back to your enclosure. On-machine panel PCs, again, without having any you know, any concrete knowledge about it, I believe on-machine panel PCs are just supposed to be rugged PCs that can be mounted, you know, directly on your machine, like, you know, what our Armor IO would be, and then a thin client with dual display. Again, that's for thin manager applications. And this slide just kind of shows, actually, I guess this is an example of what I was saying. This is actually a part number that you could build within these awesome PCs. So I believe they're all 6300, but you have size, you have I think the PCI cards are in here, the RAM, the operating system, CPU class. It's just it's very, very configurable, which our old offerings were not. So if you're an industrial PC user, it's definitely something that's going to give you more options than you might have had in the past. Okay, so now we're going to transition to, this is probably another one that I'm not sure many people know about. something called Factory Talk Hub. You can actually get to this. It's factorytalkhub.com. It gives you 3 options, and if we have time at the end, I can try to go into it. The second 2 options here, operate and maintenance, we're not really going to discuss because I don't really know them very well. I know maintain is tied to fix, and I believe operate is tied to like remote access, like a Stratix 4300, which if you're not familiar with those, find our networks guy if you do remote access and you don't know the Stratix 4300 yet. But the Factory Talk Design Hub, it essentially gives you, I guess, a way to connect with, you know, with your programs, with, you know, connect OEMs and end users. And what it is, I guess, to dumb it down, and like I said, I have an account I can try to open and we can look at, but you can come into this design hub, you can drop programs in there, and then within that you can do analysis of the programs, you can look at the properties. You can actually upgrade the firmware. You can't go backwards, but instead of, you know, either doing it through Studio or sometimes you got to do an L5K, you can actually update the version of the controller. You can update the controller itself. You can download the program off of the Design Hub. So it gives you, I guess, just a little bit more streamline in design time. And like I said, it's a relatively new tool. We might have time to hop into it just so you can get an idea of what it looks like. But it's just, you know, everything's moving more towards cloud-based solutions. So it's a cloud-based hub. And then I believe the last thing that we're going to cover is Factory Talk Logix Echo. So there was a lab, I don't know if anyone took it, there was a lab on Echo this morning, and there will be another one tomorrow from, check your schedule, it's 10 to 11:30, but if you use or want to use Logix Emulate, I would suggest checking out Logix Echo. So what Echo is meant to do is to basically cut out this part of your workflow anytime you're using an emulator. So in the past, you make your project. If you want to use an emulator, you add your emulator to the rack, and then you inhibit your I/O and you change the processor to the, whatever the emulate processor was, and then you test it on the emulator, and then you go back, and that's what this rework is, and you uninhibit all your I/O. You change your processor back to whatever your processor is. What the Echo does is it's basically, and it's hard to see here, but it's a separate software. It's subscription only, but it's a separate software that you can add controllers to. You can add controllers from an ACD file, and you can download to them through Echo. And then in links, you'll get them. There's an emulate Ethernet driver, or you can just use a standard Ethernet driver. And currently, it's only for the L8 series processors. In future, it's version 1 software. So in future releases, the plan is obviously, add the L7s, compact Logix. But you can take a project with an L85 in it, and you can just download to this Echo controller, and you don't have to do anything with your I/O. It knows it's an Echo controller. You don't have to change the processor type. You're really just matching firmware to whatever the firmware, matching your Echo firmware for the project to whatever your firmware is in your controller, and it just allows you to do that design troubleshooting more seamlessly than what you had to do before with the Logix Emulate. So again, it's I guess relatively powerful. It's also very new. We didn't have issues with the Echo software on the image, but we had issues with the images just staying connected because they're hosted in Milwaukee, and it is a separate service, a separate Windows service. So, that part was finicky. But I guess one thing I forgot, you can do produce consume tags between 2 processors in Echo. You can do messages between 2 processors in Echo. You can never do that with the standard emulator. So if that's something that interests you, I do recommend the lab. I went through the lab myself, and it's pretty interactive. It's also pretty short. It's not the longest lab you'll ever take. I know some of them are, 150 pages long. So so definitely check that out if you're interested in emulators or use emulators. That is the last slide. But since we have a couple minutes here, I guess first, does anyone have any questions? I always have a lot of slides, so I talk faster and then I get done later.
Is that Design Hub from FactoryHub.com a subscription service as well, or is that free?
No, so that will work with just your Rockwell account. I believe it is. I don't know if you have to have a Tech Connect for that or not. I guess if you try it and you can't use it, But I don't see that on here. Yeah, if you can't use it, I would say, check in. It could either be because, whatever your support level is on your Rockwell contract. But this is what the home page looks like. And again, this is just using my Rockwell credentials to log in. And so again, I don't know these two very well. I just know that they're tied. This one's tied to remote access, which I don't even have, so it's locked. And then this one's tied to Fix, which if I hit launch, it just takes me to the Fix page. But the Design Hub is the one I've used it just more to understand what it is. But again, this is just the default folder. But let's say you had a project and you wanted to drop your make a specific project folder and drop your related files up here in the cloud. And then you can come in here, you can do some analysis on the project. It's going to give me my processor type, my version. Scroll down here. Hardware review, this isn't empty. It's just a test project. It's obviously empty. But it's going to give me some of the processor specs, see where I'm at with that. Very similar, I guess, at least from an analysis standpoint, if you do the processor checker in IAB, you kind of get similar reports back. Motion axes, objects. So that's the analysis portion. I can come back and I can if I wanted to download it to as any of these file formats to somewhere on my PC, I can do that, and I can upgrade it. If I wanted to upgrade it to a later version, I can just do that in here rather than I can just re-download it rather than doing it through Studio. And again, that might not be useful if you're doing everything on one PC, but if you're working within a group or whatever, I can change the processor type from here too. And then that would just, sure. So that's kind of the idea. He says very new. It's interesting. You can see here I'm upgrading. It'll tell me when it's ready. But if you think, if you have any further questions about it, or if you think it's something that you wouldn't mind seeing either more collateral on or having someone walk you through, like I said, let your account manager know.
Can you put other files up in there, like create folders with, say you have the Logix project. Can I put prints up there with that just to kind of keep that all together?
That's a good question. That part I haven't done. I've only added Logix files, but I don't know if I have another. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Or it's just very slow. I am on their Wi-Fi. So, no, it does look like it's just ACD files, and these are L5K files. So, it appears it would just be, for project management. The solution thing, and again, every time I come in here, there's something new there. So I guess the solution would just be, adding like a different, different job to add more files to. So, and I would imagine, well, I mean, we could be candid. You know, Rockwell. I would imagine they're either going to build on this or it'll be Team 1 and it'll be gone in, you know, 2 years. So it's something. Like I said, I played around with a little bit. I could definitely see where it could be useful. I guess it's just a matter of where it goes from here. Oh, another thing, real quickly, and I looked at that history. Just in that Echo software that we discussed, where you can add the emulated controllers, you can also create snapshots. So, like similar to like a Windows operating system, you can make a project, you can create a snapshot of it, and then you can go keep working on with the same project. And if you wanted to, just revert back to that snapshot. So. Like I said, that software I'm definitely excited about, especially once they add more. I mean, I don't have a lot of L8 users, or I'm a very compact Logix heavy customer base, but as they start adding more families to it, I mean, I can see a ton of value within that. So like I said, check out the lab tomorrow. I'm pretty sure it's 10 to 11:30, but it's in your book. So, but if that's it, that's all I got for you, and I'll give you 15 minutes back.
Question.
Yeah.
1769 and the 5069. Obviously, the 5069 has some limitations on the cards. It's one of the things and this is just a question I don't expect you to know, but if you do or hear anything, what we're having problem is right now I got an upgrade going from using the conversion tool because we can go to 5069 because the IO that's existing 500. I have several customers that have isolated cards.
Mm-hmm.
And without rewiring the whole entire system, I can't do the upgrade, so now I got to rewire every single card for 8 PLCs, 8 panels.
Yeah.
And I know I have to do it.
Because there's not an isolated
There's no
option.
isolated option.
Yeah.
Is that something that they're ever going to expand on their portfolio in 5069?
You know,
1769's been out for a while. I'm concerned that I'm putting those out there new.
Yeah.
And they pull a switcheroo on me, and next thing you know, I'm putting in a couple $100,000 of cards, and
yeah.
I'll say they're going to be obsolete in 10 years. I'm going to be.
Yeah. No, yeah. We do have a monthly call where we go over like what's new and what's coming in, this world. There's not a lot anymore anyway, a lot of talk of like this new 5069 card that they're doing. Because I've had the same question for, is it Heart? I don't think there's a Heart module in 5069. And it doesn't seem like they're actively developing. And a lot of the questions that we get now, especially when we ask stuff like that, is that they're so concerned with trying to get this current stuff available again that they, that's why there's not a lot of new hardware coming out. But so all I would say is, not that I know of, and I've noticed that too. I mean, when I'm crossing, old systems or BOMs or whatever, like a OX8, for example, you see OX8s and SLICs, and there's never an isolated cross for that. And like I said, I don't know that they're looking into that, and I don't know, if there's something that they're recommending, or if that's just not, if the isolated cards don't move the needle as much as the non-isolated cards, and that could be driving that. I do know, I can tell you that it's been said multiple times, there is no plan for anything 1769 to move later in the life cycle. One is not a replacement for another, they're just parallel technologies. But
Past history shows that.
Right, yeah, I mean, someday, yeah.
For almost 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, someday.
If Rockwell has anything to say.
Yeah, and I mean, they have put some, or made some stuff obsolete with the 32 controllers, the 35 controllers, but yeah, I mean, there definitely are some options within 1769 that aren't there in 5069. You can put 1769 IO remote on a 5069 controller. You can't do it vice versa. But I guess that's always an option, or somebody, whether it's point IO, or I'd have to even look at the Flex 5000 as an isolated. I assume you mean isolated relay modules specifically, or.
Yeah, they have isolated inputs and isolated everything in analog.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and
I think a lot of the outputs, the current rating was a lot lower on 69.
yeah, I think. Well, I'd have to compare the relay with the transistor outputs. I know there's definitely a different.
Whatever it
Yeah.
output.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's, but yeah, I can tell you as of right now, I don't know of any new 5069 modules that are being developed, I'll put it that way. I guess the one thing to remember too in 5069, we didn't get into safety stuff because again, time's always limited, but the 5069 and the 1756 are still the only lines that allow in chassis safety modules. Everything else is there's no 1769 safety. I guess it's really the only other one, but everything else will be going to point IO or some remote IO. So if you're doing safety systems, 5069 is usually, unless it's lower, 5069 or 1756, usually the way to go with that. So that's all I have for you. I appreciate everyone coming, and that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, guys.